We all love sports for different reasons, but one of the main reasons is the natural storylines that play out across games, seasons, and careers. In NBA history, we have seen so many players come into the game and build their own legacy. Young stars becoming superstars, superstars becoming legends, and players with untapped potential that we unfortunately never get to see live up to those expectations. With many what-if stories in sports, they boil down to two main things that stop players from becoming these legends: injuries or players just not translating to the next level. Today we're going to talk about a player with one of the best skill sets we have ever seen, but he didn't get up to his full potential, not because of either of the two things that I mentioned before, but because of the Cold War of all things. Let's get into it. Now, our story starts in 1986, but before we get into that, I want you guys to picture the NBA right now. Now think of all the best players that you can think of currently in the NBA. Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, just to name a few. Now imagine if none of these players could play in the NBA due to something outside of their control. Imagine if there were no European players in the NBA. Now I know that seems a little bit extreme, as obviously before 1986 there were players in the NBA from Europe, but we did not see the same talent pool that we see now. If you go out right now and take away all international players, you would not have an MVP from 2024 to 2019, as Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid have all won those MVPs. Now, I say this because this is where we start our story today with Arvydas Sabonis. Now, if that name sounds familiar, yes, that is the father of Domantas Sabonis, current NBA All-Star for the Sacramento Kings. Now, why do I say we start in 1986? That is because that is when Sabonis was drafted, but he wouldn't end up being able to play in the NBA until 1995. So you may wonder, what was the holdup for Sabonis? Well, like I said, he was drafted with the 24th overall pick in the 1986 NBA draft by the Portland Trailblazers. He was not allowed to play in the US though, due to restrictions from the Soviet authorities, despite him playing at LSU and studying there at the time, keeping his amateur status. Because of this, he would not be able to go to Portland and would end up only going there in 1988 when he would start practicing with the team, but would not be able to play until later. During this time period, though, I can list his accomplishments on the screen. There are so many. He became one of the best European basketball players of all time, winning almost every single award and championship you could think of while he was over there, truly becoming an absolute beast. I mean, this guy, at 292 pounds, 7 feet 3 inches tall, he was an absolute dominant force offensively and defensively as well, winning a FIBA Club World Cup championship, a FIBA European League championship, a 3-time USSR League champion, a 2-time ACB League champion. I mean, this guy won 2 Mr. Europa Player of the Year awards. He was an absolute bucket. Eurobasket MVP in 1985. He was one of the best players that we have seen in all of European basketball as well. And yes, it may not have been as competitive as it is now, but it was still one of the best basketball leagues in the world wherever he was playing. He was playing against top talent across the world throughout this time period as well, which would end up seeing him come over to the NBA finally in the 1994-1995 European season. Now, after the 94-95 European season that I just mentioned, we would finally get contact between the NBA and Sabonis, and he would officially be making his way over to America to finally sign with the team that drafted him. The only issue was they had to go through his x-rays, which would be very, very tough to look at because he had a long injury list while he was playing basketball in Europe. When we go back and look at it, in a 2011 interview, the doctor that reported the results said that he could qualify for a handicapped parking spot based on his x-rays alone. But despite this, the Trailblazers took a chance on the player that they drafted, and they got a very good return, especially in his rookie season. In his rookie season, he would average 14.5 points per game on 55% shooting and 8.1 rebounds per game. He would only be playing 24 minutes per game during this time period, so he was very, very successful on a short amount of minutes as well. He would also end up coming in second for Rookie of the Year voting and for Sixth Man of the Year voting as well, so the NBA was already put on notice from day one. Despite him being a pretty old rookie at this point, at 31 years old, he was still coming in and dominating these players in the NBA. His postseason averages went up as well to 23.6 points per game and 10.2 rebounds per game. And in the first playoff series of his NBA career, they would lose and he would average 16.0 points per game, 10 rebounds, and 3 assists per game, all career highs during that season. Now, during his NBA career, he would only end up playing from 1995 to 2001. He would retire in the 2001 to 2002 season and then come back and play in the 2002 to 2003 season, so only playing 7 years total. Now, during these time periods, before his first retirement, he would not dip below 10 points per game and would actually be very, very efficient during this time, even though he was described as an old man during this time period as well, and it looked like he was struggling to get up and down the court, according to Bill Simmons' book of basketball. I mean, they described this guy as almost a dead man walking during this time period, and they said that his time as a Blazer was described as lumbering up and down the court in what looked to be concrete Nikes, and ranking just behind Artis Gilmore on the moving like a mummy scale. I mean, at this point, Sabonis had many injuries, like I said before, and could qualify for that handicap parking spot based on those x-rays before he even got to the NBA, which is so insane that coming into the NBA at 31 years old and already being injured, already going through all those injuries, he was still able to dominate the league. Now, that's why he's one of the biggest what-ifs. We have seen many players talking about him, including guys like Kevin Garnett, which I can include right here.
Dad was best in the world, hands down. And guess who said it? His opponents.
Now, you may look at these stats and say 7 years in the NBA while averaging 10 plus points per game every single season except your final season would be pretty good, right? Coming in at 31 years old and being able to dominate like he did, making the all-rookie team, making the Hall of Fame as well. But the way that I look at it, and like many other people look at it, is 7'3", 280 pounds, coming in as an older man, already going through all those injuries and dominating. Imagine if he was able to come into the NBA and play from the time that he was drafted at 18, 19 years old and be able to develop over those years and also be able to go through and not have to be forced to play through injuries. There have been many reports that when he was playing over in Europe, he had to play through injuries, and that's why his body got so worse and deteriorated over history. Arvydas Sabonis will always be one of the biggest what-if stories in NBA history, and he would end up making the Basketball Hall of Fame due to his massive impact in the European basketball culture. And he also became one of the biggest influences for a lot of guys that we see overseas today, and also obviously would end up having his son play in the NBA with Domantas Sabonis currently for the Kings. And like I said at the beginning of the video, it is crazy to think that this guy wasn't even allowed to come over to the US to play basketball because his coach at the time, who was the coach of the Soviet Union, scared his family into saying that he wouldn't even be safe in the US, which is why it took so long for him to come over. Now, we do kind of take it for granted a little bit how great European basketball has become, and Sabonis was definitely one of the trailblazers for that time period, which is why we have such an international game now with the sport of basketball. Hopefully you guys learned something today. I learned a lot making this video as well, and I found it very interesting to learn about another what if story. So let me know down below, guys, who do you want to see next, and I'll see you guys in the next one.